everybody. My name is Rajat, and I welcome you all on behalf of the Wadhwani Foundation for this masterclass. Uh, we have with us today Mr. Griffith David, and I'll quickly introduce him, although uh, I think most of you probably have heard of him before. So, so, Mr. Griffith holds an MBA from the Thunderbird School of Global Management in Arizona. He wanted to enter the food business and decided to take up a Subway franchisee to begin with, and then he went on to own 6 Subway outlets and used his experience to start a Mexican restaurant called Habanero, and ultimately decided to pivot to a retailing business for sauces and dips. So he's currently the CEO of Habanero Foods International Private Limited, and some of you might have seen uh, the products of his company on shelves in supermarkets and might already have used some of those products already. So we are very grateful that he could take out time today to join us and share his thoughts on uh, working on a business model and how to create a business model for your own ventures and unlock value. So without much delay, I'll request Mr. Griffith to share his experiences and so we'll have around 35-40 minutes, first 35-40 minutes for Mr. David to share his thoughts, and remaining 15-20 minutes we can dedicate to Q&A towards the end. Right? Over to you, sir. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Rajat. Good evening, everybody. I hope everybody is fine. I see that there are people joined from India as well as Philippines and around the region as well. So welcome. Thanks for having me as a speaker this evening. So just very quickly, I'll just walk you through a short presentation that I have and hopefully kind of take you through some of my thoughts. Can you all see my presentation, Rajat? Is this clear?
Yes, sir, we can see.
Okay. So I'm calling this from computer chips to tortilla chips. That kind of shows my journey in the corporate world. I started my career after my MBA with Intel in business development and the Intel Inside brand marketing program, and I was selling computer chips. I was doing it across APAC, Singapore, Philippines, Indonesia, Thailand, and then I joined Yahoo, and then I was part of a startup doing mobile gaming on phones in Finland. And finally moved back to the States and joined a company called iGate, which was offshoring jobs to India. And that's kind of how my attention focused back to the Indian market. I'd been gone from India for a long time. And, I had a passion for food. I love to eat. I love to experiment. But beyond that, I really did not understand the business. But I wanted to get into food. Something was really, really driving me towards a food business. And so I decided to work with a famous franchise and kind of crack the Indian market and learn from that. And Subway was just kind of entering the Indian market at that time. This is 2005, 2006, very brand new. I was one of the earliest franchises of Subway. Jumped on board, opened up a bunch of Subways across southern India. And Subway was so new in its development. The national marketing board was being formed. I was invited to join the board for Subway India, and I was part of that board for 8 years. Helped kind of guide the brand, the marketing part of the brand for the next 8 years. Phenomenal experience. Learned a lot from that experience, and that's how the idea of launching my own restaurant business came into being. And I'll explain why in my next few slides. This is important for entrepreneurs to understand. So I went from a franchise business where I learned a lot from one of the world's leading franchise businesses to starting my own restaurant business, which I scaled up as well across multiple cities. And then I franchised my own restaurant to other franchisees. Because of my learnings from Subway, I learned the franchise model and did that. And then into the business, I realized that our customers were coming in, and as they were leaving, they would ask for our tortillas to take away, our salsas to take away, our sauces to take away. And thus 2 years ago was the idea of, launching my own retail business kind of kicked in. So we kind of started slowly, opened up, tried to bottle some of our salsas in bottles and try and sell it in the local supermarket. It backfired quite badly in the first few months, because you can't take a restaurant product and bottle it and put it on a shelf. It doesn't work, right? For various technical reasons, because you need to have shelf life, you need to have consistency. There's a lot of problems associated with that. So created a separate business unit, bought in experts in retail, not from the restaurant side, in retail, brought in a food technologist, brought in salespeople who are into this whole side of the business. And then we slowly started moving into that. And we pivoted from the restaurant side of the business slowly into being a completely retail-oriented brand. We kept the brand name, but pivoted completely. And the reason for that has to do a lot with the market segment and valuation. These are very important things for entrepreneurs to know. Why you look at the market size, market segment, the valuation, the scalability, which I'm kind of coming to in a bit. So one of the things I wanted to kind of focus on was this model, I believe, that has been followed in the Wadhwani curriculum, which is the lean canvas model on how to put together a business model, right? And this is a very useful model. It's a good template to follow. And I'll try and walk through the habanero story using this model, right? So the first part of this is, of course, the segment that you're going after. And so in my case, we moved from the restaurant business into the sauce business. Obviously, for me, I fell into that because customers came and asked for my sauces and they were taking it away. So the first thing I had to do was, what is the size of this opportunity, right? Is this a big opportunity? So you go and find your secondary data, your primary data, talk to people, figure out what the size of this market is. And in India, it's a huge market. It's a 30,000 crore market. And it's growing fast. And the condiment space, which is the space that we are in, is around 3,000 crores. That's a huge amount. That's a very large market size, right? Now, why is that important to know? It is important to understand the size of the market that you're going to be playing in, so you can understand how big can you grow. At some point down the road, as you become a larger company and you're going for VC funding, PE funding, this is one of the first questions they will ask you. This is one of the first things that they will research, and they'll come back to you and say, your segment is too small. We don't want to invest. Or our mandate is we only invest in certain segments, which is this particular size, right? So that's one thing. Second thing is scalability. How scalable is this business? Now, for me, with the habanero restaurant model, scalability becomes a challenge. Restaurants are very difficult to scale. You can scale up. There are examples, obviously, of many restaurants that have scaled up, but it's an infinitely more difficult scalable model than the sauce business. The sauce business, with one back end, you can scale. If I have a factory in Bangalore, I can service the world. I can export. I can service New Delhi. I can service Mumbai. I can supply to California. With the restaurants, with that same kind of capex, how much can you service? You can service a neighborhood. You can service a city. But beyond that, it's very, very capital intensive. So scalability becomes a very important aspect. The other very important aspect to understand is the revenue multiple. How do you value your business? So the Subway business, for instance, a franchise model, it's not an easy model, but it's when at least when I started with Subway, it was quite difficult because nobody understood the brand. It was just starting off. So it's very complex. But today, 15 years later, it's a fairly easy model. Fair easiness, nothing in business is easy. This is relatively easy because the brand is established. They give you manuals. Everything is set. You have, the supply chain, everything is set. So it's fairly easy to get into, fairly easy to operate, and there are very little advantages that you have as a franchisee as opposed to another franchisee. So the revenue multiple that you get when you sell that business is 1x of your revenue. So supposing you're making, let's say, $200,000 in revenue. When you sell that store, you get $200,000. That is one-time revenue. Now, when you go into your own restaurant, and supposing you've scaled it up, it's profitable, and you've made a success of it, the multiple increases, maybe it goes up to 3x, 3 times your top line revenue. When something like a product business kicks in because of scalability, and because of the reach and the jump in revenues that can potentially come down the road, your multiple goes up even higher, 5 times, 6 times top line. So these are the very important considerations to have, before you start a business. I just wanted to talk about this. It'll save you a lot of time and effort because you'll be very optimized in the amount of effort that you put in, right? So according to the lean value model, what is the problem that you're trying to solve? For me, the problem was very clear. In India, the shelves are either full of expensive imports or cheap, low quality Indian products, right? So as I started doing my research, I realized that there was a big gap in the market. These expensive imports coming in from all over the world, from the US, from Europe, places like that. And then, competing products from India with a low quality, badly packaged. And neither of these options was palatable for me as a customer. I was like, there's got to be a solution here where I can create a high quality international product at a relatively cheaper price, at an Indian price. So this is our solution, right? So you identify the problem, what was our solution? So our solution was to come up with products that are international quality in nature, by the way they look, the way they're packaged, the way they taste, very high quality, but price it at local Indian pricing. Now, how does one do that? How does one...
There is Hanadi, please, thank you so much. Please, whoever is not speaking, please keep the microphone muted.
Thank you, Rajan. So how does one ensure that you create a high quality product at a relatively good margin? You do that by sourcing locally, by using local labor. And India is home to an incredible range of products, of produce, of tomatoes, of garlic, of onions, most of the ingredients, of chilies, most of the ingredients that we need in the sauce business are available in India, maybe within 50 kilometers of Bangalore. So that's what we set out to do. So we are able to create international products at Indian pricing with a gross margin of around 60 to 65%. A gross margin, again, becomes very important. Otherwise, you don't have a business model, right? So that's the solution for us. Now, again, if you keep going down on the lean model, the next thing is, how do you differentiate yourself? What is your differentiator, right? What is your unique USP? So you start mapping out according to your competitors. So for us, this is the way we mapped it out according to our competitors, right? What is our pricing? Are we a premium product? Are we a semi-premium product? Are we a mass margin product? And we've somewhere here, it's a semi-premium kind of pricing model, which kind of makes us slightly different from some of the other players. What's the distribution strategy? Are you going to be in retail? Are you going to be in e-commerce? Are you going to be a multi-channel? We decided to be a multi-channel player with a focus on e-commerce. So that's kind of one differentiation. What's your customer focus? Are you B2B? Are you B2C? Right? So we decided very clearly that we're going to be a B2C player. And what kind of products are you going to churn out in the market? For us, it's very clear. We're going to only have international flavors. So we're going to have, we're going to bring curate flavors from around the world to the Indian plate. So world on a plate, that's our value proposition, right? So these are some ways to differentiate, make your brand unique in what you offer. The next part of the lean value model is a revenue stream, right? So now you have to figure out, how am I going to ensure revenues come in, where the revenue is going to come in, right? So obviously pricing is a major factor of your revenue, right? I mean, and you can't price it too low because then you'll have serious cash flow issues. You can't price it too high You price it too high, you'll compete, you'll not be competitive. So you got to analyze what the competition is doing, right? What kind of prices are there in the market with the competition? Do you have a unique enough product that you can price slightly higher than the average price? Or do you have a unique cost benefit factor in the back end that you can price it lower because you still have a good margin? So all these kind of things come into consideration. The gross margin target that you have. For me, we have a gross margin target of around 65%. So any business we get into, any SKU, any new product line we get into, I have to make sure that I'm able to provide an international product at Indian pricing. That's my value proposition to my customer. That's a promise I made to my customer. Now, can I do that? So let's say my peri-peri sauce that I've launched. So I take the peri-peri sauce, I go to the market and I see, there is a gap in the market. There is an expensive product that's coming in and there are really bad Indian products. Yes, there is a gap in the middle. Great. That's point number one. Now my next point, how big is the size? How big is the peri-peri size in the market? Are there enough people buying this product? So I go and do my research. I talk to my distributors. I talk to people out there and I realize, hey, this is a big market and there is an opportunity. So now my next challenge is, now how do I provide my value proposition of a great product at a competitive price and provide a 63%, 64% margin? So I go and check out the ingredients. I go, do the R&D. I come up with the product, the pricing, and I play around with it till I'm able to hit the quality that I want and the gross margin target that I want. And then I know I have a product here that meets my value proposition, meets my gross margin target, and I can price it at a point where it'll start moving, right? So it's very important. This is a very, very important exercise. Obviously, you got to make sure that you meet your volumes, and for that, you got to make sure that ingredients are available. So for me, I got to make sure that bird-eye chili, which I use in peri-peri, is available throughout the year. I don't want to be importing these products. I want to make sure that they're available locally so that if a pandemic hits, ports don't get shut down and I have access to my ingredients, right? I got to make sure that I have enough working capital to be able to order products in bulk. I've got to make sure that I'm able to distribute these products. So these are some of the things that go into the revenue stream consideration. And then you kind of build out, you do a projection, revenue streams. Next few years, what's your revenue going to look like, right? Like I said, it's a projection. It's based on pricing. It's based on your volumes. It's based on, distribution points, what your gross margins are. When will you break even? How many, how much do you have to price it, and how many products do you have to sell to be able to break even? At what point does that happen, right? So this is just a basic exercise that you got to go through. To understand how much money do you need. So if it's going to take me 4 years or 3 years or 2 years to break even, and I'm spending 10 lakhs a month, how much money do I need to get to that point where I break even, so that I can know that when I can go and get it funded, I can go to the bank, I can go to a VC, I can go to friends and family to raise that money, right? So this is a very important exercise. So I'm just going to keep this very high level and move through these slides fairly quickly and maybe take more questions, because I really am not sure what level of questions people have. I hope that's okay. I'm just going really fast here. Rajat, is that fine?
Sure, sir. That sounds good.
Okay.
That will be great. Yeah.
All right. So next is, so now you have solved the problem, you've identified the problem, you have a solution, you figured out what your revenue streams are, you've got all this great plan in place. Now how do I make sure that the product gets out and reaches the market, right? In my business, retail, because majority of Indians today shop still in retail stores, whether they're modern trade, they're general trade, neighborhood stores, majority of Indians still shop in retail outlets. Having said that, e-commerce is really taking off. In the last 1 year, e-commerce has grown 400, 500% for certain brands. So, you've got to be in retail, you've got to be in e-commerce, you've got to be in institutions, right? So you've got to have a mix of different channels. And you've got to identify some clear partners in these channels so that you can have growth happening. For us, e-commerce, Amazon is the #1 player for us, obviously. Now, we've been with Amazon for more than a year. We are with Flipkart. We are with Big Basket. These are the 3 biggest players in the market, and we're with all of them. And obviously, retail outlets, the big names in the market, right? The problem with retail for us is there is a cost element to it. We have to pay a listing fee every time we list, which becomes quite expensive. So you've got to kind of figure out, you got to pick and choose very carefully. You've got to be in retail because your product gets visible. Customers recognize you, customers take you seriously because now you're in a very large department store. So from that perspective, it is important, but at the same time, you got to play around with depending on how much money you have. Do you want to blow it everything on retail or not, right? So these are decisions that you've got to make based on how much money you have and what segment you are, what segment you're in. So I'm talking about distribution. And of course, in institutions, we are in the large 5-star hotels, places like that, that gives us credibility, that gives us volumes, that gives us cash flow, that we can pump into the other retail channels. For us, we have taken a decision not to be a B2B institutional player. And again, it goes back to valuation. And the reason being, if you're a pure B2B player and no branding, your valuation falls dramatically. You might have large volumes, you might have high sales, but you will have maybe 2 times valuation or 1x or 2x because nobody knows you as a brand. So it's very important to keep the valuation multiple in mind in your day-to-day business strategy, right? Everything goes back to that objective at the end of the day, because at some point you'll have to sell your business, or maybe you might hand it to your children, but they might want to sell the business. So there's a valuation element always that you need to keep in mind as a business person, right? To optimize what you do. So here you identify your channel touch points. So for us, we are looking to be in 1,500 modern trade stores. We're looking to be in 7,000 general trade stores. We want to be in 1,000 institutions. We want to be in, the top 10 e-commerce touch points. So you need to identify these very clearly and go after them, right? Again, from a channel perspective, how do you penetrate the channel? If you don't penetrate the channel, customers don't know you. Customers are not aware of who you are, right? You would have cracked the problem. You have a great solution. You've got beautiful revenue streams and margins that look fantastic, but you got to make it real by actually cracking the channel, right? So if you're going through the retail chain, you need distributors. You need to walk to the best distributors in town. And if you're a new guy or a startup, these guys look at you and say, who are you? I'm not interested. Or they may give you really unfair trade deals, trade terms. And these are decisions you have to make. It might be a bad deal for you, but for you to make a name, for you to get into that distribution chain, maybe you need to do a couple of deals that might kill your bottom line, but actually gets you into those stores, right? So these decisions you need to make. Maybe you need to do sampling to give products free to customers so they understand what your product is and they go, wow, this is a great product. And it's a very competitive pricing, and they come back and buy you again. These are some of the things we did. So whatever business you're thinking about, please think in terms like this, right? Digital, I'm sure most of you realize, is a huge, huge play. It's becoming one of the biggest plays in India. From say 5 years ago, where digital there's hardly anything happened with digital. Today, if you do not have a digital strategy, you're pretty much dead. Especially for a B2C brand like ours, we have to be on digital. So we're very active on Amazon. We're very active on Big Basket. We do video campaigns on Facebook, on Instagram. Our tagline is "Cook like a chef," and we work with chefs across Bangalore who cook with our products and show off certain recipes, and then we put it on YouTube and we publicize it and things like that, right? You guys need to understand, search engine optimization for your web channels, for Amazon, the importance of title searches, the importance of videos, importance of images. There is so much data that shows that just changing the pixel quality of your pictures, product pictures on Amazon, increases your sales X%. Using the right keywords on your title on Amazon increases your sales a certain percent. It's a science. There's algorithm-based channels, and you got to understand the algorithms that drive brands like Amazon. So if you play that game very well in the background, you can be a David in a room full of Goliaths, right? In retail, the beauty of e-commerce today is that In retail, to stand out in a shelf with like a Unilever or any of these big brands, you need a lot of money. You need to be visible. It's very difficult for startups to do that. But on e-commerce, it's an algorithm play. With a relatively small amount of money, if you're smart, if you know what algorithms to play, you can be more visible than the biggest brands in the world. In retail, branding is built through television advertising. On e-commerce, branding is built through customer reviews, not on television advertising. A guy who's coming in on Amazon will buy a product based on customer reviews, even though he's never seen an ad of that product. That's the beauty of e-commerce. So there are certain metrics, there are certain things that you need to follow on e-commerce, and you can really shine on that platform. PR, again, is a great way to crack through the clutter, relatively inexpensive, and people tend to trust what they read in the press. So something very important for you guys to understand. Metrics. So everyday business, as you're growing, as you're going through, you need to understand what metrics to track, right? How am I doing as a brand? For each of your business might be different. For me, I track my top line growth, year to year growth. I track my channel growth month to month. What's happening on my channels? How many products am I selling? How many SKUs am I in? You know, how many stores are my salespeople getting my products into? How many distributors have we signed from month to month? So for each of our businesses, for each of your categories, these metrics might differ. But you know, you will kind of get obviously your top line, bottom line are very important, right? You need to track that. You need to track the ratios that go into your bottom line. So for instance, what are the metrics in your industry for salaries, for instance, for your employee salaries? Different industries have different metrics for salaries, right? Depending on the margins and things like that. So stick to those ratios when you do your costing. My salary should not go beyond 10%. My rent should not be beyond this much. My product cost should not be beyond this much. So for me, with a gross margin target of 65%, for me, very clearly, my cost of my raw material and packaging should not be greater than 32-33%. That's a metric that I track very, very clearly on a weekly basis, right? So these are the things that you all need to track in your various businesses. For me, how many cities I'm cracking is very important. This is something that we monitor on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, right? So for each of you, it will be different. Again, costing is something that the lean model talks about. Obviously, one of the most important aspect of pricing. Without a proper costing, you will not know how to price your product, right? So there is a product costing aspect and of course a business costing aspect. So product costing aspect, ingredient costing, what are the ingredients that go into your product? Where can I get the most optimal pricing of those ingredients? Where, so you've got to make sure that you're checking out multiple suppliers, make sure that you're getting the best deal from an ingredient perspective, right? Costing is also fixed cost and variable costs. Fixed costs are things like salaries, rent, admin, etc., which doesn't change month to month unless you have consultants working for you and you're paying them based on their performance and things like that. And then you have variable costs that change depending on your sales. How much, the more you sell, the more raw material you need. More packaging you need. The more you distribute, the more transportation you need, and obviously marketing as well. As you become bigger, marketing cost goes up, but that's a variable cost as well. So these are some of the variables. These are some of the factors for costing. Okay. So this is an example of channel margin for us. So I look at, okay, I'm going through a general trade retailer. I'm going to give my distributor 10%. He's going to give the retailer 30%. That's 40% gone. I am left with 60%. And with this 60%, I need to make sure that my margins work out, right? So you need to understand your channel movement of your products and what kind of margins to give. This goes, but you have to work backwards to understand this, to work backwards to go with your pricing, right? This is a product margin sheet that we use. Again, sorry, this is very small, probably not very clear, but just to give you a quick understanding of what I do, I calculate the percentage that I give to my distributor. And then from there, I take my input costs, like my raw material costs, my packing costs, my overhead costs, and then kind of from there, I deduct my transportation and then come to the margin, right? These are just basic spreadsheet and templates that I want to share with you guys so you understand, how to kind of do this stuff. There's a section on unfair advantage in this matrix. I've been in business so long, and I've never really had a clear example of an unfair advantage. It's very, very unusual to have an unfair advantage because the market, if you do have an unfair advantage, the market usually catches up very quickly. So you've got to have something unique. So for me, one of the unfair advantages that I've had with my subway business was that I own the subway at the Bangalore International Airport. Now that's an unfair advantage because I have a captive audience. There's nobody competing with me, right? But those advantages are very, very rare. You might have an incredible product that nobody else has that will give you an unfair advantage for a relatively small period of time. But, competition, especially in India, people replicate very quickly. Indian businesses, they're very good at replicating, right? They see that somebody's successful, boom. In 6 months, 1 year, you'll have a product in the market. I think you've got to just build a sustainable business model based on your value proposition. The business model itself becomes your advantage rather than any one factor, right? So what is your value proposition, right? I just want to kind of talk about this, my summary, right? What is your value proposition? What problem have you solved? How unique is your value proposition? How well have you differentiated yourself from the competition? What are the channels that you're going after? How effectively are you milking those channels? Your revenue streams, right? Are you getting the optimum revenue? Are you leaving money on the table, or are you charging too much? Your margins, your costing, your supply chain, right? And of course, the thing that last but not the least, is your team. Your team can make or break you. If you have a phenomenal team, I think that's the biggest unfair advantage you can have on your competitors, because a lot of people have really bad teams. And if you can build up your team, you can incentivize your team members somehow, maybe through ESOPs, maybe through incentives, to whatever culture that you build. That can be a big unfair advantage for you guys, right? And here's my last slide. I think I'm almost on time here. I'm just trying to be on time. I want you all to read this. This is something that I believe in firmly. It's one of my favorite quotes. And I've seen the power of this in every business that I've been involved in, every startup that I've done. Basically, if you're bold, the whole ecosystem moves for you and produces all kinds of wonderful things. So have a business plan and then dream, and put the business plan under it to take your dreams to the next level. Any questions? I'm happy to answer. I think we have 20 minutes left.
So thank you so much, sir. I mean, that was wonderful. Let's have a show of hands, and I'll then call out names one by one. Whoever wants to ask a question. Clebon, yes, please go ahead.
Let me just lower my hand first.
Hi.
Hi, how are you, Mr. Griffith?
Thank you. I'm good. How are you?
I'm absolutely motivated by your pitch. Firstly, I never saw your face until now, so you sound 20 somewhat. But firstly, well done. I think you've done an absolutely amazing job with Habanero.
Thank you.
And I think you possibly also reached that point that many entrepreneurs reach, and that is having a great idea and needing to get to market. All these great opportunities exist, but there's a certain risk you need to take. And I see that you took a great risk with your partnership in Subway while you were still very small. How did you mitigate that risk without really putting your IP at risk, partnering with such a big player in the market? So although they were small in India, I mean worldwide they do have a great audience where that which you brought to the table could have been taken away from you very quickly. So how did you mitigate all of that?
So I'm trying to understand the question. Are you saying how I mitigate the risk of it being taken away? Taken away in what way?
By partnering up with a big organization such as Subway.
Okay, so I don't perceive that as a risk because you have legal contracts. A franchise agreement with a franchise brand is 20 years, you know, and those are agreements that hold in court and things like that. I think the risk over time is the cost, the opportunity cost. That's the risk, right? So you know, in the beginning, obviously, it was a tough business. People did not understand what the Subway brand was all about. People would ask me when I approached landlords, they would say, "Subway, is that like Amway?" And I and I would feel so depressed. It was terrible. But you know, I had been in the US and I was a big fan of Subway, so I understood where the brand's potential lay, and I took a big risk. The risk that I took was, will the Indian audience adapt to sandwiches, which was a relatively new thing? Because in India at that point, sandwiches was something you ate when you were sick. You ate bread when you were sick. People told me that all the time as I launched Subway, and I was like, oh my God, you know. But what's happened in India has been amazing. The leapfrogging, the taste profiles, people have just adopted all kinds of stuff very quickly. But to me, the risk always was, will you get so comfortable as a brand grew and you'll just become a franchisee and that's it? You know, a lot of people ended up doing that. For me, I kind of broke out of that. While my Subways are still there and they're generating good cash flow for me, I wanted to do something different. I wanted to kind of do my own brand and kind of build it up, you know. And it was a phenomenal learning that I got from Subway to help give me that foundation. Right?
Awesome.
So
Thank you
anybody
so
out
much.
there that, you know, anybody out there who wants to try a franchise model and learn from it, I would highly recommend. That's a great path to take as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mr. Griffith.
Thank you.
So next, Ahmed Mutasim, you can ask your question next.
Hello, good evening, Mr. Griffin.
Hi, Ahmed.
How are you doing? I am really a big fan of you.
Thank you.
My question is, it's a bit aside from the topic we're going on, but I really wanted to question your background and education. The thing is that my profession is kind of away from business, but I really want to moderate in business. So what advices would you give me so I could somehow educate myself best in the business world? Knowing that I have a startup, I have initiated about 1 year ago, but I'm not grasping the model concept that well.
So what kind of startup do you have, and what segment of the what space is it in?
Okay, here in Sudan, we lack accommodation venues. The country is very what do you call it? The country is big, and we have rare accommodation places, rare hotels, no places for accommodation for tourists. But I really wanted to take that advantage and create and use that demand to create Sounders Homestay. So what we do is that we allow local Sudanese people to host tourists for them, and we generate income from that. So it's a bit of tourism and accommodation.
So it's like an Airbnb that you're trying to create.
Exactly.
Okay. So where are you getting stuck in that? So you've identified it looks like a fairly large market segment. You've identified a problem. You've identified a solution. So where are you getting stuck?
Okay, part of the problem is that here in Sudan, we lack access to data. We have no data. So basically, me, Ahmed, I can't find the proper way to grasp the data, the market, so I could conduct a market research. So you could say right now I am one step behind of generating income by finding the tourist. I can't find the tourist.
So is that data that you can get from the tourism department or something like that? They must be tracking where tourists, what cities tourists are going into, right?
Unfortunately, there is no official data here in Sudan. We some sort of find this hard to find, but there is no data, unfortunately.
You know, there are great ways to find information, right? By tapping into taxi drivers, people who are talking to tourists, by talking to airports, by talking to airlines. You can piece that data together. It may not come from one source, right? So you piece it together by working with people who are in the ecosystem of handling tourists. So your airlines handle tourists, the airports handle tourists, taxis handle tourists, guides. So you just kind of put it together. And that could become an unfair advantage for you once you have that, once you put that together. You will know exactly what's happening that a lot of people don't have access to, right? So in markets like this is what you do.
Okay, sounds great. Okay, so one last thing. So for me, it's kind of tough to find my persona and my marketing segment. So what advices would you give me? Because tourists are basically international people, and I can't find that proper mentality.
I mean, are you active on the web?
Yes, I am.
That's the most obvious place. I mean, so how are you targeting them? So you've got to understand the power of search engine optimization. You've got to work with people who understand that. So when somebody is doing a search for Sudan, you pop up. When somebody is doing a search for a air ticket to Sudan or to Africa, you pop up. So, you know, you kind of, you basically come up with a bunch of keywords. That's what people do usually, right? And then, so it's called search engine optimization. I mean, any good web agency will be able to help you with that. I'm sure those are available in Sudan. You can take classes on web engine, search engine optimization. These are fairly inexpensive ways to target people who are coming to you, right? You don't need large amount of money. So Google, and there are a lot of things that Google offers. There are things that Facebook offers, where people are congregating digitally, right? That should be your focus.
Yeah, okay, sounds great. Thank you very much, sir.
Good luck.
Okay. All right, so Dheeraj DS, you can ask the next one.
Hi, sir. So this Dheeraj, I wanted to know like 3 things after seeing your presentation. So you had shown that to penetrate into the market and to get to the retail stores, you had set up stalls and things like that, right? Like set up stalls or had a separate shelf for your products. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to understand, how do you get that sort of deals with the retail stores or shops? That was one thing. And the next one was, how do you find the employees? Let's say we have a business plan in our head. And how do we find the right employees and in the right pay that you should like give them? And the third was, let's say it's in food and beverages sector. And then how do you do the safety analysis or the safety aspect? Like it's just a one-time thing, but you can't employ someone. So I wanted to know regarding that too.
Right. So first question, you can't start from day one. It took us a while before the retailers realized that my products were selling. My customers are coming and asking my products, that they start taking you seriously. As a startup, you walk in and say, I want to set up a booth. They'll say, okay. Then they'll try to make money out of it. They'll say, give me, a bunch of money. If you have that kind of money, they'll help you set up a booth. Most of the time, you don't have that money, right? So you've got to kind of make sure the product is working, the product is selling before you get to the point of doing a distribution, before you do a deal with them. And essentially you'll say, look, I'm going to add value to you, And what I'm going to do is every time your customer buys something worth, say, 1,000 rupees, I'll give away a sample bottle free. So they like that deal because it means that, and if you promote it, it means that customers will come more to their store. So you have to find something that's of value to them, right? And for you, it's also value because you're giving away a sample to a customer who's spending 1,000 rupees. So you know this customer has money to spend. You wanted them to sample your products. It's a win-win deal. This is how you make deals when you don't have money, right? As a startup. That's one of the ways that we work. The second question was, how do you find people? Is that what you said? So
Yeah,
was your
yeah.
question? Well, I mean, the good old-fashioned way, I think you have to start. It's easier if you have a founder or a couple of founders in your business, because then you all work together as employees together. And first you hire people that you hire references of people that portals like Naukri have thousands and thousands of people online as well, right? So it's a process. And slowly you'll start building it up. That's how you do it. There's no magic bullet for it, unless you have a lot of money and you can pay a whole amount of money and hire some people, right? And most times you won't have that, right? What was your third question? Sorry.
It was regarding the safety aspect. If it's something related
Safety,
to food
yes.
and beverage.
There are all kinds of labs today. They give you what's called a COA, Certificate of Analysis. You can send your product to them and they test all kinds of things, your stability, consistency, viscosity, all that kind of stuff. And they'll give you a certificate which you need before you launch your product.
So assuming like you had told that if you want to set up stalls in retail stores, you have to like pay them a certain amount in case you're some relatively new or something. So let's say in an average, like in Bangalore itself, in any retail store, if you want to just set up your stall outside the shop, like what would be the approximate cost per day or something that you'd have to pay approximate?
There is no average cost, unfortunately, Dheeraj. It depends on if you want to be in Indiranagar on 100 feet road.
Yeah. Okay.
Obviously, your price is going to be much higher. If you want to be in Hosur, middle of nowhere, in a small retail store, the price is going to be different. So it differs very, very widely. So I don't want to give you a number that's wrong either way, right? So yeah.
Let's say Indiranagar. Approx, like what would be your
I think it'll cost you a few lakhs.
Oh my God. Per
not per day, for maybe 2-3 days or something like that. If it's a weekend, they'll charge you a lakh. Yeah. Plus the cost of setting up the structure and all that kind of stuff.
Okay. And who's the right person to get to? Like,
Dheeraj, I think
it
was supposed to be one question.
This is the last thing, sir.
5 questions.
This is the last thing. I'm sorry for taking.
No, Dheeraj, it's okay. Why don't you send the questions to him and maybe he can collate and send it to me later.
I'll do
I'm
that.
sure.
I'm sorry for taking up too much time.
No problem. Thank you, Dheeraj.
Thank you.
So next one, I think user wants to ask.
Hello, Mr. Griffith.
Hi.
Yeah, you can hear me very well.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So my question is, I have an idea of startup. I'm starting to evaluate it and make it grow bigger a little bit through Wadwani program, Ignite program. The thing is, with my idea and the segment, not the segment, actually the market. I'm targeting beauty and fashion industry. So the thing is, it's a very renewing market where every single day there's new things happening. So the thing is how to make the idea that I have right now suitable for future, since I'm not pursuing it right now. Like the market segment and everything, they are renewing daily on a daily basis. So how to make that sustainable for a period of time? I hope you get me or you get my idea in this question.
I'm trying to
understand.
I'm trying to understand the question. What's that?
Could you repeat or maybe be more precise with the question? So
yeah,
you
it's
said that you're
a vague question. I'm not sure. Maybe you don't want to divulge what you have. Probably is that the challenge? You don't want to divulge particularly what you're trying to do.
Yes, the thing is, in Africa or in Sudan in specific, the market is a little bit like not following international market.
Mhm.
So the thing is, if I started in Sudan to say, my idea will be a little bit behind from the market outside of Sudan. Will that
Okay.
affect my spread later on?
No, no. Okay, that's a question. So you have to understand what the market is looking for. You have to identify what that gap is, right? Sometimes here's an interesting lesson. Sometimes a customer himself doesn't know what he needs. You know, I'm being very vague because I don't understand your industry. I don't understand what you do, but so you can provide what the customer wants today, or maybe if you think there's something that's cool that's happening in the US and you want to bring it to Sudan, yet you're not sure there's a market for it. Is that your question?
Yes.
So what's stopping you from bringing it? Is it too expensive?
Yeah, it's expensive, the standards and the way of marketing it and the
So
understanding of the
can't you offer
customer.
that? So can't you offer that costly product as one aspect, and then you do like a pyramid, right? Where the people who come and pay for that are small, but it's a high margin product for you. You provide it at the tip of the pyramid, and then you have bigger services which the majority will do, and then you have bigger, like it's a pyramid pricing. So you can come up with multiple products in your offering. And if you're doing something cutting edge on top and it's cost effective, word of mouth will spread. You will get more customers, and your pricing will, maybe the pyramid will start going like this, right? You will have more and more customers on top as well. I don't understand. I'm being very vague because I don't understand your pricing. I don't understand your competition. Very hard for me to tell you beyond this.
Okay, I understand you. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. I hope I've been helpful.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Any more questions? Who wants to ask the next one? Yes, please go ahead, Hanadi.
Hi, this is Hanadi from Sudan. I have cybersecurity project. My niche market is banking system in Sudan. So my question is that how I can make those customers trust on my startup, since I'm already new in the market, trust on me.
Could you repeat? We couldn't hear you clearly when you spoke about the product and the idea. Could you repeat the question?
Okay, my project is cybersecurity company.
Cybersecurity.
Yeah, for banking system. Since it's a startup, how can they trust on this project?
I think typically what startups do is you go and execute a project with a big name partner or partner that is known at a very, very cheap cost. Maybe you won't make money. It's what you call a loss leader. You may not make any money out of it, but you have a proven business model. You say, look, I have now a client, I have a customer, right? I've cracked this deal. I've got a reference from this customer. That's your basis. You need to start from somewhere there. So do you have somebody like that you can go after and get a deal? Because you need to provide references. When you go to the next customer, he'll ask you, okay, you're a startup. How do I know that you're good? You can say, I've done this deal. I've got this reference. Please speak to him. Make sure they give you make sure you do a great job though, right? And you have a good reference. This is one way to do it. You have to start somewhere, and especially in your industry, that's a way that a lot of people do.
You mean that I should work under the umbrella of non-name? You mean I should work under the umbrella of already non-name at this field?
What Mr. Griffith said is, let me clarify. He said that you have to acquire the first customer.
That's right.
And that will take some effort. You might need to do some convincing, maybe offering some services free of cost or at a lower cost, whatever it takes to acquire the first customer. And you start building from the first customer. When you go to the next one, first ensure you do a great job with the first customer. So the first customer can give you some references. And when you go to the second one, you can say that, I have already done successfully with the first customer. And that's how you start building from one first to the second to the third to the fourth, right? You have to
Okay,
spend a lot of effort
okay.
to the first, yeah, the first customer. Once you get, you can use that as a first step of the ladder to move to the second customer. Then that can act as a second step to the third customer, and so on and so forth. But
Yeah.
make sure you do a great quality work so that your customers are really happy and act as your promoters.
And they should be convinced to give you a deal because what you offer them is so compelling from a cost perspective. It is a great offer for them. They'll say, why not? Let me try this person, right? That's how you get that first deal.
Absolutely. So anybody else wants to ask a question? Anybody who would like to talk about any kind of business model that you're working on? If you want any insights in that? Amna, yes, please.
Hello, Mr.
Hello.
Sorry, my question is not about business models, a little bit about segments. In our startup, we have 3 segments. Now,
I'll just request you to be a little louder. I'll request you
here.
to be a little louder.
Yeah.
okay, so we have 3 segments. So we were arguing with the team that we should focus on the most important one, like the most important, the least important, and we leave the third one. But some of us say that, no, we should pick the 3 of them and then work on them all. But we're saying that maybe in the future, we're going to have problems. So we should only take 2 because we are a startup. This is the first step for us. So we shouldn't focus with 3 segments. What do you think?
I don't understand the exact business and what you do, but just as a general rule, focus on the one that you feel is going to generate the most amount of income. Again, depends on your objective, right? See, for me today, I'll give you an example. Right now, there's a pandemic raging in India. Nobody's going to retail stores. For me, it is absolutely critical that I focus on one segment right now, which is e-commerce. And everything that I have, everything I focus on is that one segment. I've ignored retail, I've ignored institutions and everything else, and only focusing on e-commerce because that's where the revenue is. That's going to keep me alive. That's going to keep the money coming in. So what is that one big thing that's generating? So most of the time, it's fairly simple. There's this 80-20 rule, right? 80% of your revenue comes with 20% of a segment. What is that? Find that. And if you're a startup, focus on that. You can't do multiple things. Nobody can do multiple things well. Focus on one thing and do it well. That's my advice to everybody.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Any more questions? We have 1 or 2 more minutes. Although we are past 7, we can take 1 more minute to answer any further questions. Surprisingly, we haven't heard any questions from any Indian participant. Maybe these guys know it all and I'm not asking any questions. I've heard questions from all the other geographies present, not from any. But anyway,
So I have
so any
a question.
final questions, guys? Okay, yes, I'll give you one last one.
Yeah. So I have an idea for a startup in the education industry, and like in India, there are a lot of giants like Byju's and the career labs, etc., who help in counseling and all. So my idea is not something very proprietary. It can be copied very easily. So how do I proceed with my idea, ensuring that it is not copied? Because if such companies get into the same model or deliver the same product, they might be able to deliver it at a lower cost with more expertise.
Most companies are focused on just doing what they're doing. They're not looking at a small startup and thinking of stealing your idea. I mean, that's more your concern, your insecurity than what is actually happening, right? If it is a big enough segment, they'll already be doing it, right? So I think that's the least of your concern right now, whether a big guy is going to steal your idea, right? What you have to do is, if you think the idea is big enough, then you figure out how to make it happen. Right? Take the idea, test the idea, follow the lean model, figure out whether the model works or not. Right? Get a prototype, understand what the market gap is. There are still a lot of market gaps in edutech. There are a lot of companies that are still getting funded. A lot of startups that are raising money in edutech still. So apparently there's a lot of action going on. It's a very hot sector. So find something niche, find something unique that's there. I wouldn't worry about whether somebody's going to steal my business, my idea. Actually, it's not the idea. The idea, I'll tell you, in most businesses in India especially, the idea is maybe 10 or 20%. Execution is 80 to 90%. Everybody has an idea, but it's the execution that matters. So that's what you need to
very
focus on.
important thing. I think Sir has mentioned that people sometimes get too fixated on the idea itself and forget about the execution. I've also heard Dipinder Goyal from Zomato. He had a quote which said that the execution sometimes doesn't get as much importance as it should in the entrepreneur's journey. So execution is something
you can have a mediocre idea and execute like crazy and do it fantastic, or you can have a fantastic idea and screw up the execution and screw it up. Right? I would go with the execution any day.
Yeah. So rightly said. I mean, Yash, that challenge is always there for any entrepreneur. Somebody can copy and do the exact same thing, but remember, Google was started by two new people, and Microsoft was in existence for around 20 years before, 10-15 years before Google started. Microsoft tried as hard as they could, but they still couldn't beat Google with their search engine. So, and so on and so forth. You can find a number of examples. Google didn't copy of Facebook. Facebook came when Google already had a social media platform called Orkut, and Facebook did a better job and beat Google at it. So don't worry about somebody copying your idea. If you execute it well, you can always stay ahead of anyone.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Ahmed has requested one final question. Ahmed, one last one, and this is the final question for this session.
Yes, it's the last question. Sir, I would like to ask about the e-commerce. Sudan is kind of a virgin market regarding e-commerce. What tips and advices would you give someone who's new to the market and the market is new?
So what's happening on e-commerce today? Are people buying stuff? What's happening in Sudan?
Okay, so basically Sudan had sanctions for the last 30 years. So buying from the internet is something kind of new, actually. So
what's the internet penetration? How many people are using the internet in Sudan?
No, the internet, it's widely used, but the thing is, the transaction of money is kind of new to people in Sudan. ePay, PayPal.
Okay, so how are people paying for stuff that they buy online?
Local, old tradition methods.
No, but if you buy something on e-commerce in Sudan, how do you pay for it?
Yes, because lately, about last month, the sanctions have been lifted. So that's why the market is new.
Oh,
I want to take advantage of this. What advice would you give?
I think it's a phenomenal opportunity. I mean, e-commerce is the wave of the future. You have to be part of it. It's incredible what I've seen happen in India in the last 2-3 years. It's growing. Our business has grown 400% in the last 1 year just in e-commerce, and in the last 2-3 months it's grown another 200%. It's just insane what's happening. And so there could be various opportunities there, right? I mean, you could look at listing your products there. You could look at figuring out how to transact. It may not be your Airbnb. It could be something else. The e-commerce space, if it is just new, it's a massive opportunity. When I talk about opportunity market size, that's a market size, right? It could be bigger than anything that's going on right now. Because trust me, this is the wave, right? Once somebody shops on Amazon or does an e-commerce purchase, he becomes a convert immediately, and the incidence of visits to the store drops dramatically from that customer.
Okay,
and
so
e-commerce is so new that Amazon adds on 30% of its traffic every day is a new customer. 30% of Amazon's traffic every day is a first-time user. Imagine that.
Wow, that's really impressive.
Yeah.
Okay, so what advice would you give the old Griffin if he had just started the e-commerce strategy? What advice would you give yourself back then?
I would have become more aggressive on e-commerce much earlier. I waited a little too long. I did not spend as much money and effort and time on e-commerce. I wasted a year on that, which I should not have. So I'm telling you, get on it very quickly because it's big. No matter which country, it's going to be huge.
So Ahmed,
Figure out what's going to work.
I'll just add one last input to this. What sir has already mentioned. You mentioned your business is in accommodation and you want to create something like an Airbnb. Airbnb's power lies in e-commerce. Airbnb is not a brick and mortar business at all, right?
That's right.
Airbnb is just a web platform which connects buyers and sellers, right? So that itself explains to you the power of e-commerce. What started as a single page basic website with hardly 5 listings is now $1 billion company present across the globe. That has been made possible by e-commerce and not through any other medium. I think that should,
do you have an app right now? Do you have anything on digital for your business?
Basically, we're working on a website, but the second phase is doing a mobile application.
Okay. So I would spend more resources, time and money on doing those two things because that's the way for you.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
That's the future. But the thing is, I don't know how to reach my website and my application to the upcoming fourth tourist. But you have told me that to use the SEU, and that's I think the key.
So step one is to set up your website and set up your mobile app. That's step one. Without that, obviously, you can't do anything. Make sure it's a good app. Make sure it's effective and efficient and all that. Once you do that, you use Google, you use SEO, all kinds of things to make sure that it pops up. And then, like he was just mentioning earlier, Rajat was mentioning earlier, you become an online play. That's going to be far bigger than anything else you can do offline with your business. Look at what Airbnb has done. It's incredible.
Yes, exactly.
And there's no competition right now in Sudan. If most people coming to Sudan can't find anything online and they find only you, imagine the opportunity you have. It's incredible.
Right.
That's your opportunity.
Yes. I'm very grateful, Mr. Griffin. Can I have are you so active in social media?
Yes, I am. You can find me on LinkedIn.
Okay, we would be grateful if you posted your link.
You can search him on LinkedIn. There's no need for us.
Just do a search for me. You'll find me.
A little bit of effort can be done from you guys as well. Right. So I'll take this opportunity to thank and express my gratitude to Mr. Griffith that he could take out time and I personally really enjoyed the journey of how Habanero started and all those minute details you shared with us, sir, that, what are the key areas that you should focus on, which we generally tend to miss out, especially about gross margins and how you had the projections also lined up for 5 to 7 years. And so, I mean, it's really wonderful to understand the entire business model from the perspective of a company that has established a name for itself and is on a very nice growth trajectory. Thank you so much for joining us. That's all I can say right now. I think the participants found a lot of value in the session as well.
I hope
we will definitely look for more ways to associate with you in future.
Thank you, Rajat. I really appreciate being invited and I really enjoyed talking to all entrepreneurs. I think entrepreneurs are a very special breed of people. They never say no. And to me, the most important aspect of entrepreneurship is grit. Grit meaning never, ever give up. That's the main thing. So good luck, everybody.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir. I wish you a great evening, everybody. Thank you.
Take care. Thank you.
Guys, I had shared a link on the chat. Please take out 1 minute of your time to click on the link and share your feedback on the session.